40% of evangelicals didn't show up at the last election. So to give you some impact of that, that was 7 million voters in the swing states that decided the last presidential contest, as well as, of course, many other contests up and down the chain. So we're really looking this time to really boost that evangelical vote. So that's a real important project for us.
What would you say are some of the issues that matter most to Christians?
Well, I think Christians are not, in what people think, they're not single issue voters. Of course, pro-life is at the top of the issue. That's one of the key issues for evangelicals, but also the weaponization of government, the persecution or the cancellation of Christians across the media sector today, especially on social media platforms. That's key. The economy is a big issue as well. Christians are feeling it just as much as anybody else within the society today, that the economy is not robust, it's not strong. And so we see that. We've seen the downturn in Christian giving. And then, of course, there's issues of foreign policy, support of Israel, and the border. These are all issues that are important to Christians.
Troy, there's probably a fair amount of agnostics or cultural Christians, if you will, that may not know what you mean when you talk about the cancellation of Christians. Talk to us about some examples.
Yeah, so if you're a Christian today and you're out on social media or you're a Christian organization, you're going to find a lot of opposition today and more scrutiny on your posts. So if you post what we talk about today, the key things, if you're going to post about the family, about marriage between a man and a woman, if you're going to post that there are only two genders and go against this whole transsexual movement that's going on, if you're going to post pro-life issues, you're going to probably find that your posts are more scrutinized. We've had a number of our organizations. We had a television channel, The Dove, out in Oregon. They had their entire channel canceled by YouTube. So it was taken down for a quote-unquote public policy or public violation of their policy out there. So this is rampant throughout social media today.
Troy, I want to get your thoughts on abortion. Obviously, this is a very contentious issue in this election cycle right now. Former President Trump has obviously appointed judges to overturn Roe versus Wade. He stated his stance clearly. How are evangelicals weighing his position right now?
Well, look, it's really the position of the other side and more than it is the Trump side. The Harris campaign's position is as far as you can get on abortion, all the way up until until actual birth. They're not even supporting what we would call a Roe Amendment position, which allowed for a lot of exceptions within state.
And then back to our agnostic friends and viewers out there, or people that may not be practicing their faith as diligently as one might. Talk to us about the relationship between Christianity and Israel.
We look at the land of Israel as the Holy Land. Christians have supported it for this is the place where Jesus walked. This is where the ministry, this was the birth of Christianity and the church. And our Christian roots are in Judaism. That's the roots of Christianity. We're not, Christianity isn't really, we talk about that way because it's been labeled that. But look, this is out of Judaism. In the first 2 centuries, most of the Christians were Jews. And all of the original leaders in the Christian movement were Jews. So we understand there's a close Judeo-Christian relationship and tie there. And so Christians have been strong supporters of Israel. We support Israel's right to exist. That's first and foremost. We also support what we call, this is the God's land. God gave this land to Christians or to Jews. So this is one country that's not a divided country as the UN's tried to do. So we look at what is called the West Bank. That's what was called Judea and Samaria. Those were the areas that Jesus preached in and held his ministry in. So we hold a strong support for our brothers and sisters in Israel and their right to have this land and right to defend themselves.
How do you think Christians can be more motivated to be active in politics and getting out to vote?
There's been these movements to label Christians as the only group, but it's really interesting that they're the only group that gets labeled and shamed to stay out of politics. So it's not really about, hey, Christianity doesn't have a place in politics, because we've always had a place in the public square. Christianity has changed almost every culture it's gone into. And today, if you look at politics is really driving the culture. It's no longer following the culture, it's driving. We have the, as we talked about, the transgender movement throughout the school system. We have the movement that's gone through our higher institutions that have pushed socialism agendas and other anti-Christian agendas out there. We've had marriage issues that have been pushed by the culture, and of course, the politics is driving the pro-life issues today, or opposing pro-life as much as possible. So if you're a Christian and you want to look at who's going to govern you, who is going to decide the future of policies that are going to affect your life, in the morals and the values that you hold dear to you, as well as the economic situation that you're going to be in, you need to be involved in this process. That we've been given the right to elect the officials who will govern over us. And so that's one of the things that we're really pushing today, is Christians have that right. They just need to exercise it.
Troy Miller, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Apply for other legal methods to stay in the United States, while they were given the parole. Meaning that, hey, you're getting a free house and free food. I'll go over what they're getting. Free a lot of things, tons of stuff, but that is temporary. And look, since they were given parole, it also gave them a type of semi-legal status that made them eligible for all these things. But the expectation was, hey, you're not just sitting at home watching TV during this time. You need to be looking for other ways to stay in this country and support yourself. You're not just going to take care of you forever. And that's now coming up. Now, look, although the programs are now ending for some of the groups, people from Ukraine and Afghanistan, they are being allowed to renew their parole. And so it's not, the parole program isn't ending for everyone. Again, only at this point, Ukrainians and Afghanis, they're getting the ability to renew it. Other ones not. No, it's not going to be there. Now, like, importantly also, this program is still just including just a fraction, a very small fraction, of the illegal immigrants who've been allowed into the country over the last few years. Now, it's going to affect around 530,000 illegal immigrants. That's a lot of illegal immigrants. But remember, like, the previous numbers we had were over 7 million allowed into the country just under Biden. Some believe that number is well over 10 million by this point, given the numbers are letting in every single day and every single month. And so this is technically a small fraction, but this small fraction is one of the ones that is getting all these government programs and benefits and so on. Now, like, it includes around 214,000 Haitians, 96,000 Nicaraguans, 121,000 Venezuelans, and around 111,000 Cubans. But look, on the other side of this, even though people from these four countries are going to lose their parole status, it does not necessarily mean they're going to be deported. And this could become an issue either way. Imagine, for example, you have people from Venezuela who come here. Many of them, if there's no opportunities here, they might consider going home. I don't know about that. A lot of them are going to be looking for ways to stay legally and work legally. And the problem you're going to have with that is those who cannot find that, there are now gangs trying to recruit them to get involved in criminal enterprises. You're going to have a recruitment drive for the gangs, which they're already doing, by the way. Now, look, again, on the other side of this whole program, just because parole is ending, right, doesn't mean that this is going to basically go away. House Republicans are saying it does not necessarily mean the illegal immigrants are going to be deported. Here's a thread on X from the U.S. House of Representatives Homeland Security Committee Republicans. They say this: there are numerous other ways they could be allowed to stay. They will likely apply for asylum. And remember, because of the way things are happening right now with asylum, you apply, it's not remain in Mexico, it's remain in the United States. And if you remain in the United States, well, the courts, they're not going to get to your case for like 10 years. So we'll see if they grant them all these, temporary asylum cases. It'll also say they're very likely to try to get temporary protected status, or given ICE's low enforcement rates under this administration, they say, simply not be priorities for removal. There's more to that. I'll get into it in a bit. But they add this. They say this lack of enforcement is part of the reason the non-detained docket has doubled in size since the Trump administration. Remember, the recent DHS, Department of Homeland Security Inspector General report found that the Biden-Harris administration still has no plan to remove 77,000 Afghan nationals who were paroled in 2021 and 2022. Again, they're going to be allowed to renew their parole anyway, right? But they note the same report also, quote, found DHS does not have a process for monitoring parole expiration, meaning they don't really seem to be able to deal with this issue at all. Maybe all it'll do is make it so they don't get all the free handouts, right? Now, look, the report they point to is this one. This was from May of 2024. It's from the Office of Inspector General at the Department of Homeland Security. This is it. Let me show you. It says this further in. Department of Homeland Security, DHS, does not have a process for monitoring parole expiration, and the guidelines for determining re-parole for OAW parolees were undefined. Now, note that DHS has a multifaceted but fragmented process for identifying and resolving issues for non-citizens, read illegal immigrants, with derogatory information, including OAW parolees, these individuals allowed into the country and granted parole temporarily. They note this siloed approach creates potential gaps in DHS components' responsibility for terminating parole. In other words, they don't really monitor them close enough to actually end their parole. They don't really have the oversight necessary to even end it legally for these individuals. Raising the question of, well, if they're not going to renew the parole, what's actually going to make sure they're not still getting all these social welfare benefits? Well, they say that they don't really have the ability to do it. And note they also don't have the ability for initiating removal proceedings, i.e. deporting them, or monitoring parole expiration. So there's really nothing in place, in other words, to make sure they don't get social welfare benefits, nothing really in place to make sure that we are able to deport them if it's deemed that they can't stay here, raising a lot of questions, including, notably, it's not really a program to monitor parole expiration or who has it and who doesn't. How are they even making sure that people maybe not on parole are also not getting all these social welfare benefits? They note as well the process was complicated by litigation surrounding DHS's immigration law enforcement policies and factors such as consideration of a derogatory information during the re-parole and parole extension process, meaning they probably got called racist by someone and they sued them, right? And it's a DHS must consider how to address the vulnerabilities in the USCIS and ICE processes for resolving derogatory information and to establish processes for both managing the end of parole and ensuring data integrity. Translation, they don't really have a way of keeping track of any of this. Basically, it says they don't have a system in place to end parole for the illegal immigrants. And so if we're at where we are now, where they're not renewing it, there's no system for it. And notice there's nothing there to monitor the program really, or again to deport them if they lose parole and they're not allowed to stay here. Meaning they're here, and if they want to go home, they can go home, and if they don't, they don't, in other words. Now look, there are also a lot of loopholes that could let the illegal immigrants stay here, whether they have parole or not. Even aside from the lack of tracking, there's a lot of other things they're going to be eligible for. Now, notably, this could result in them filing lawsuits, one of the most likely cases, because imagine state by state, you have hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants being represented, again, by law firms that do class action lawsuits, and they're just suing the states. You're probably going to see that. They can use other means as well to stay in the country. But look, the big difference this is going to likely make is that a good chunk of the free handouts could be coming to an end for a very large number of illegal immigrants. And the timing of this announcement is important also. It's happening right amidst all this controversy that FEMA, right, disaster relief, may not have enough money for long-term disaster relief efforts. They say we have enough money right now, but not long-term, especially notably with this new hurricane getting ready to hit Florida tomorrow. They're saying already, right, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said this publicly. They don't have the resources to take care of that. Now, look, also remember the fact that FEMA was involved in programs to house and care for illegal immigrants that cost taxpayers around $1.4 billion. The optics of it are bad. I'll be talking about this more after I come back from a quick break.